Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhidamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. So we are summarizing the text, and yesterday I explained in brief some of the teachings of the Sikshavalli and Brahmanandavalli. And at the end of this Brahmanandavalli, that is at the end of the second chapter, we have got this well-known expression, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha Anandam Brahmano Vidwan na bibhedi kutaschaneti. So, this is the mantra. Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. So, the idea is this highest experience is not a concept, it is an experiential fact. It is something that we experience. So, we should not mistake a concept or an idea as an experience. But the concept is necessary, intellectual conviction is necessary, because it helps us to reprioritize our values in life. Even if we can intellectually connect our mind with some higher ideal for which we should live, and then what happens, on the one hand, a lot of distraction and diversion of our intellectual and physical energy resources can be avoided, and also it will have a soothing effect. Otherwise, every moment, in every experience, our mind will be dragged into various sense objects all the time, and that is a terrible problem. Actually, all kinds of anxieties and fears are due to the distraction of the mind. When the mind is simultaneously dragged into various sense objects, various sense stimuli, and then these frictions create fatigue. On the one hand, if we can have a central ideal, even as a concept, it helps, but concept is not the end of the spiritual journey. Experience the end. So, yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha, where mind and words returned without reaching their destination. That's the idea behind. Means words cannot explain or define or describe this absolute reality, and mind cannot really cognize this absolute reality, because mind and senses together can only objectify objects, and that process is called knowing or knowledge. Now, this transcendental reality, that's our true nature, is not something that can be cognized, it can only be experienced. And when we experience that, the first sign is, see, you can find na bibheti kudaschaneti. Then you won't be afraid of anything, and nothing will be, or no one will be afraid of you. So, yasmano dijade loko, lokano dijade cheka. You find the Gita, also you find. That is Bhakti Yoga. No one is fearing anything from a devotee. A devotee has no fear from anything. Now, remember, the immediate risk is, we may imagine spiritual life is just like floating in the air with absolutely no friction, always enjoying, always smiling, always singing comic songs, clapping the hands. It's not that. That, in fact, when that interpretation can create a lot of problems in interpreting spiritual life. So, na bibheti kudaschaneti. This means such a person is not afraid of anything, And the other way around, nothing and nobody is afraid of such a person. What does it mean? We may have to face problems. I'm just trying to give a very practical interpretation of this highest Vedanta. How Vedanta can come to our rescue, come to help us in our everyday life situations when we face all these so-called problems. You know, the so-called problems, they are not problems from the higher spiritual perspective. So I would say so-called problems. We won't run away from problems, but even while facing these problems, we will have this conviction in our mind. These things are belong to the empirical life, what we call vyavaharika satta. Things which are bound to change. Things which don't stand strong, stagnant or stable all the time. So once we keep that in mind, then we will face problems. People may feel a bit disturbed. They may have some slight anxiety, concern, but it won't be a life-threatening, it won't be a devastating problem. You will be able to face those problems. Well, I can give one example. That is from our own Vedanta society. A great Swami came to San Francisco. His name was Swami Trigunatitananda. He came at the beginning of 1903, January 1903 he came. He was sent here by Swami Vivekananda to take up the San Francisco Vedanta Society's work. I have read his life very carefully, and thanks to the wonderful contribution of Sister Gargi, Miss Margaret Noble, she wrote an outstanding work, biography of the Swami. And he was, before coming here, he was wandering in Tibet, practically wearing some rags, in extreme cold climate, begging his food, packing his packet with some dry rotis, drinking water, moving from place to place in the most unlikely place, Tibet. And he was wandering all over the Himalayas, begging his food, as you should imagine. This is a traditional way of ascetic practice among the monks, traditional monks in those days. So if you can see his picture in Vedanta Society's, our office, disheveled hair, beard. Now you see his picture when he came to San Francisco Vedanta Society. He looks like if he's a big CEO of a big modern company, 21st century company, well dressed and all that. Now you won't think, unless you are told, you won't think the same Swami is standing here. Now what happened, when he came to Vedanta Society of San Francisco, he came here with a mission, a spiritual mission. He was asked to come here by Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda had given him very detailed instructions on how to reorganize and rebuild the Vedanta Society of San Francisco, which was in a chaotic condition when that Swamiji had to come here. That is at the very beginning of the year 1903. After coming here, within a few months, he underwent a complete transformation, almost overnight. He had a big goal in mind. What is the goal? Nothing of his own. To reorganize Vedanta Society. And he actually started a convent, a press, a journal, and built the first Vedanta Society, the first temple, the first Hindu temple outside Asian continent. Not only in the West, that's the first Hindu temple built outside Asian continent, especially in the West. And then all this he did within around 13 years, and he passed away in 1915. very short time. And the temple construction began on August 21, 1905, and it was dedicated on January 7th, 1906, and the construction was over around November, December. So just a matter of less than 5 months, which we took 3.5 years to renovate and rebuild using the latest modern technology. Now, what I mean to say, how could he do that? You have to keep in mind, this Swami was a wandering monk in the Himalayas without any special empirical worldly ambition. He was just like a enlightened spiritual person, a hidden spiritual person. He was wandering from place to place with the long hair, with the beard, with you can see his picture. He was wearing some thick woolen blanket and not even a shirt when he was traveling to Himalayas. After coming here, he took upon himself this gigantic task, and he had to face a lot of difficulties, which I am not going into details into. The point is, how could he do that? Because he thought he has a higher goal, higher purpose in his mind. And he had seen Sri Ramakrishna. He was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He came here with the blessings of Holy Mother, and he was asked to come over here by Vivekananda. So when he was doing this work, you find he had to go through innumerable difficulties, very difficult to explain in a class like this, but still it didn't bother him. His health was also not very good towards the end of his life. So how could these men achieve great things? Yesterday I referred to Shankaracharya and Vivekananda. But right now I am referring to a Swami who lived in our own city, who built the first temple in the Western world with so much of effort, so much of dedication, but no problem was a problem for him. No fatigue was a fatigue for him, because his mind was dedicated to a higher ideal. So, no problem was frightening him, and no challenge was too much for him. That's why those who have a spiritual goal in mind, the first thing is they will be fearless. It is not fearlessness or recklessness. There are different manifestations of fearlessness due to recklessness, ruthlessness. No, this was a kind of serene fearlessness. Fearlessness mixed with serenity, peace, inner contentment, inner joy, perfectly at peace with everyone, and with a sense of compassion and love for everyone. So that's why the Upanishad says, those who get this Brahmanandam, this bliss of supreme spiritual realization, they are not afraid of anything, and nothing, there is no need for anyone to be afraid of them. I have to repeat again, it is not a fearlessness that you associate with a brave adventurer. It is not a fearlessness associated with physical bravery. It is the transcendental experience of a person for whom life has got a much higher meaning and purpose and scope. So then, not only that, they don't bother, he says, Etam kavavava nat tapati kimaham sadhuna akaravam kimaham papam akaravam iti saya evam vidvaneti atmanam sprinute. Now, they don't worry because their mind is so focused on this higher spiritual ideal, they cannot physically or mentally do anything wrong, and so nothing bothers them. They face a challenge, they face it with bravery and courage and go ahead, but for them it is nothing, not a problem at all. So this experience helps you totally free from any kind of fear or anxiety. One may ask this question, this experience is far away, at a far distant goal. Can we have it? Even the intellectual understanding of the hypothetical possibility of one day attaining this experience itself is enough as a great healer. Even, that's why I said, even an intellectual concept of this higher possibility will take care of a lot of our problems in life. That is, when we have a higher spiritual ideal in mind, and then we regulate our life as it comes, what happens? These problems are no more problems. So that's why I gave the example of Swami Trigunatitananda. Because I have to give an example who lived in our own city not long back, and we had the monument in front of us, which is his creation. So it can be practiced by anyone, not only by monks. Sometimes people ask this question. For monks, they have no problem. We have families, we have obligations. So it is a special privilege for monks only. Not at all. It can be practiced by anyone. Some higher spiritual core. So if we constantly associate with these ideas by reading, by listening to these ideas, that itself becomes gives a healing touch in our life. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that life becomes a bed of roses. It doesn't mean that life becomes an unbroken succession of happy, joyful experiences all the time, singing and clapping the hands. Not at all. What it means is, it equips our mind with an armor plate. What is that armor plate? This concept of this higher spiritual possibility, which we get a glimpse of, and then when we get a glimpse of this, everything else becomes manageable. That's what I said, reprioritization. Everything is there, but there is something which deserves top priority. So this is the conclusion of the second chapter. The third chapter, as I already mentioned during the early sessions, is a dialogue. We already discussed this, but still, in summary, I have to speak just a few words. It is called, Bhrigu Valli. So this particular chapter is named after a person called Bhrigu. Bhrigu is the name of a boy who went to his father, who happens to be his teacher. So his name is Varuna. So he is called Varuni. So Varunasya Apatyam Puman Varuni means Bhrigu is the son of this sage called Varuna, this great saint and philosopher. So one day the little boy asked his father, please teach me this highest spiritual truth or experience. Adhihi Bhagavu Brahma iti. So when this question was put to him, the father did not go about giving a definition or a description of Brahman. What the father did was, he tried to connect Bhrigu to this higher transcendental truth. So Bhrigu is a boy who is living in this world, who sees these mountains, valleys, rivers, trees, and so on. So that's something that he sees every day. So father told him, think of all this, which matter. Annam pranam chakshusotram manovachamiti yatova imani bhudani jayande yena jatani jivandi yet prayandi abhisambhisandi tad jignasaswa tad brahma. This is called tatastha lakshanam of Brahman. We will describe it earlier, already described. So what he says is, think of from where all these things originate, and think of what sustains them, what is the preserving principle behind them, and think of what may eventually happen to all these material phenomena. Can you think of their origin, their sustaining principle, and eventually their destination, you realize that. Then you will get the answer. It is an indirect way of teaching what is Brahman, what is this ultimate spiritual experience. So the indirect method is called Tatastha Lakshanam. See, in the earlier chapter, we already Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, we already discussed. The Upanishad tells you Brahman, the absolute reality, is the absolute existence, the absolute truth, and the absolute knowledge, and the infinitude. So, if you can think of existence, awareness, consciousness, and infinitude as absolute, transcendental, that is an approximation of the highest spiritual reality. After having given that definition in the Bhrigu, in the third section, chapter, the Upanishad tells you if anyone can go in search of the origin of this table or chair, he can eventually reach the ultimate spiritual truth. See, suppose you have a wooden table in front of you. That wooden table was not a table, let us say, 50 years back. It was in the form of a tree. That tree, maybe 200 years earlier, it was in the form of a seed. That seed was part of a tree, another tree. Now, like that, these things go on. Now, behind this phenomenon of evolution from a seed to a tree, there is a spiritual truth that enables the seed to evolve and become a tree, and the seeds of the same tree giving birth to identical trees. So there is one inherent divine reality, spiritual reality, that is responsible, that is not visible, but that is responsible for this existence of all this. So Bhrigu was asked by his father, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. You realize this through tapa. Now, tapa is, again I explained, it's very interesting. You find this tapa mentioned in all religious traditions. Darwin also meditated. That's why when the apple, if that incident really happened, when the apple fell on his head, he thought, and what he did was tapa. Chittaikagryam manatapa. So when you mind, paramam tapa is another definition. When your mind and senses are drawn away from external objects and turned inward, that introspection, the introspective process is called tapa. So when the apple fell on his head, it made him think, what must be the cause, and what must have induced this apple to fall down onto his head? Why it didn't remain stable in the sky? Why did it fall? So his mind was ready. Because this man was thinking about the mysteries of many things in this world, which is what a scientist is supposed to do. Is hitting at the doors of nature with a big hammer. So when he hits with sufficient force, it's called tapa, introspection. The nature opens its doors, reveals the truth. So I'm sorry, not Darwin, it was Newton. Sorry, sometimes it happened. Of course, Darwin also is true. Darwin's discovery of the evolution is another example of tapa. Unless Darwin's mind was ready, this would not have happened. So when I was talking about the apple falling on the head, I was talking about Newton. So Newton's mind was ready by this introspection. So eventually he described this in the light of the theory of gravitation. Suppose a person's mind is not ready, if he did not do tapa, even a big stone falls on his head, his head may break, but that won't make him discover this great truth unless the mind is ready. That is true eventually, though by coincidence, it is true of Darwin also. So in the Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, you find Atmana Akashat Vayu Vayu Rakni Akdirapaha Abhya Prithivi Prithivyam Oshadeha Oshadi Bigannam. Like that, there is a kind of parallel description of evolution in the Taittiriya Upanishad. How from the highest, subtlest reality, the whole world evolves. That is the evolution from subtle to gross. That's called evolution, unfolding of the phenomenal world. And when you try to find out the real cause of this phenomenal world, then you are actually reversing this evolutionary process. It is called involution, reverse evolution. So you find out the cause behind this gross phenomena. So tracing the effect of the cause is called involution or reverse evolution, going in search of the fundamental cause, tracing the cause. And when you talk about creation, it is nothing but the gradual unfoldment of the subtle into gross form. So, and though it was by sheer coincidence, Darwin also did tapa. That's why he could come out with this. But this tapa is done at the external world. When you concentrate your mind through introspection on the external nature of the world, it's called science, scientific discovery. When you turn the same attention inward, it is called spiritual realization. So that's why Yatova imani bhudani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanta visamvisanti. So at the first stage, what Bhrigu realized was, matter is the origin of the universe. So annadimani bhudani jayante annena jatani jivanti annam prayanti abhisamvisanti. So annam here stands for, not for food alone, but it stands for everything that is material, made of matter. So the first evolution, the first stop in our journey in search of the ultimate cause of the universe, the ultimate truth behind the phenomenal world, the first stop is matter. But as we go further, beyond matter, we find a vital energy that energizes all material entities. That is conscious. Matter itself is not conscious, but energy has more consciousness about it. So Bhrigu thought, energy is the ultimate source. So prano brahme divyajanat pranat imani bhudani jayante pranena jatani jivanti pranam prayanti abhisamvisanti. So from prana, vital energy, this whole universe emerges. Prana sustains all these material phenomena, and everything is dissolved into prana. But the father said, no, you are not right. Father told him, continue your introspection, your spiritual journey, your introspection, your concentration. So when we do this introspection, what really happens is we connect with the deeper layers of what we already know earlier. We are not getting something new. We are only connecting with the deeper and subtler layers of what we already know. You can see this. If you read any great statement from any philosophical, spiritual literature, if you just read and then close the book and think, what happens is, we may read more meaning with eyes closed, but my mind becomes more active when eyes are not connecting with the written words. mind becomes more active. So mind goes deeper into the written words. It is called mananam. And as this process intensifies, that introspection becomes more stable and steady. It is called nididhyasana. So as the boy Bhrigu continued his spiritual journey, at the third stage he thought mano brahmedi vyajanat. So manaso hyeva imani bhudani jayante manasa jatani jivanti manam prayanti abhisamvishanti. He says manasaha imani bhudani jayante. From mind everything evolves, he thought. Now you get such ideas in Yoga Vasishta, in Adhyatma Ramayana, in Ashtavakra Gita, some of the technical books you find. There, mind is not what we call the mind. Normally, mind in its ordinary sense means a continuous stream of disconnected or mutually conflicting thought currents. That's what mind really stands for. In the higher books, when they say everything is coming from Chittam, it is not the mind, the thought as we understand. Because so long as our mind is connecting with these external things exist. When our mind transcends these external phenomena, then they exist, but our mind goes beyond it, and then it is no more the mind. When the mind ceases to be a continuous stream of thought currents, it is no more the mind. Mind is called a mind only when it is functioning, operating as a stream of thought currents. That's why that's called, it is called antakarana vritti, sankalpa vikalpatmiga antakarana vritti mana. Mind is nothing but antakarana vritti, is a vritti of the internal organs, the inner mental system, which includes not only mind but also the ego system and also the repository of memories, all included in this chittam. That chittam functions as sankalpa and vikalpa. It is called mind. So Bhrigu realized, and immediately it occurred to him that this mind is changing all the time. So mind cannot be the absolute reality. So he continued his journey, his introspection, according to the instruction from his father, tapasa brahma vijignasasya, the saying. That's why when we do tapa, then we realize our own spiritual identity. Frequently, people will tell you, very often this view is there, or there is no proof for Atman or soul. So it is not existing. It only means with the present available tools of modern science, we may not be able to establish the truth of a transcendental spiritual reality called the soul or Atman. But we may need more equipments, more tools, more instruments to prove the reality of this transcendental truth. But experiment doesn't take place in a laboratory in the external world. The experiment takes place in the laboratory of our own mind. So when these experiments take place in the form of introspection, meditation, prayer, or deep thinking, then we realize the truth of the Atman within. So Bhrigu realized mind cannot be. And beyond mind, he realized Vijnanam. Vijnanam brahmedi vijnanat, vijnanat imani bhudani jayante, vijnanena jatane jivanti, vijnanam prayanti abhisamvishanti. Intellect. Beyond the mind, intellect. So that also was wrong, his father told him. And this boy continued his spiritual practice. Finally, he realized this Ananda. And so Ananda is not Anandamaya Kosha. Ananda here means that state of inner blissfulness. So when we realize this, what happens? We will immediately understand that this is beyond description, beyond definition. And it is something which cannot be explained. Now people can ask this question, Rdham cha swadhyaya pravachane satyam cha swadhyaya pravachane etc. In the early chapters in Shikshavalli, you studied that we must practice swadhyaya and pravachana. We must study these things, that we must impart these things. So, if this highest spiritual experience is beyond explanation, beyond definition, where is the point of imparting this to other spiritual seekers, or in the context of householders, they have to teach some of these great spiritual teachings and discipline to the next generation? It is mentioned here. What it means is, for a person living in this world, any kind of association with these great ideas, either by reading for oneself or by teaching, becomes a spiritual practice. So the ancient sages, after having realized all this, they continued teaching this. Siddharamakrishna, he taught till the end of his lifetime. Vivekananda was teaching Sanskrit grammar, Laghu Siddhanta Kaumudi. It's a primer in Paninian grammatical system. Shankaracharya was teaching to the end of his lifetime. And Christ was teaching, Buddha was teaching. So you do not find any great spiritual teacher taking holidays, taking rest, retiring from teaching. So after having realized the fact that what they have realized is beyond words, they continued trying to impart these teachings in words. So how do you reconcile this? For those who have realized, teaching itself becomes a spiritual practice. That's what happens. For those who have realized, teaching itself becomes a spiritual practice. You find some of the monasteries in India, Dharmashala, we find Buddhist monasteries. They go on rotating this prayer wheel, and they go on chanting, often mechanically. These Buddhist chant, Buddhist sutras. You find this happening in these prayers in many traditions. We may ask the question, the highest reality is beyond explanation, beyond words, so what's the use of repeating this? Repeating this becomes a natural practice of the advanced realized person, and it becomes the path to reach that realization for the beginner. So, finally, when Bhrigu realized this, he became fully established in Ananda and a state of total freedom from fear, as we explained yesterday, total freedom from fear. So, we already discussed this earlier in the earlier portions. This is one important characteristic of, even intellectually, emotionally, connecting with this idea. When we feel there is something much higher and bigger and transcendental, then other things will not affect us. In Buddhist tradition, it's called Vyavaharika, it is called Loka Samvruddhi Satyam, Satyam cha Paramarthadaha. So Nagarjuna writes in his Mula Madhyama Karika. The highest spiritual reality, the transcendental reality called Shunyam, and the empirical reality called Samvruddhi Satyam, which Vedanta is called Vyavaharika. So I have just given a brief summary exposition of the Taittiriya Upanishad. Now we have almost 45 minutes. So I thought last day, at least most of the session of the last day should be devoted to Q&A, question and answer session. So if there are questions that you want to ask, either related to this text or any other Upanishads or in general spiritual life, you are most welcome to ask. We can have discussion.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
So on this issue of intellectual understanding versus experience and conviction, so we have an intellectual understanding that there will be future births, right, unless you are realized in this birth. But it may not be a full conviction, several of us. So what should one do to develop more of a conviction around it? Like, it's a little different from Atman or the absolute truth. It's about how do you approach spirituality in this life in the context of more births or whatever and having conviction around it.
You know, the problem of worry about the existence or non-existence of reincarnation, it comes in the context of our eagerness to get something quickly now and today. So that's one important problem. Mostly people ask this question. We may spend a lot of time, lot of energy and resources to do spiritual practices, but we are not very sure what concrete results they may create, they may produce. We don't think they are totally useless, but we have no proof to show that it is really worthwhile spending a lot of time and day like that. So Vedanta discusses this subject in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter. Arjuna asks a similar question to Krishna. The verse comes in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It says, Ayadi Shuddhayo Pedo Yoga Chalida Manasaha Aprapya Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gadim Krishna Gechadi Kachino Bhayavi Brashta Siddhnabhyuvanashyadi Apradishto Mahabhavo Vimudho Brahmanapati. This is the, I shall just wanted you to know this verse so I can read in the 6th chapter. So Ayadi Shraddhayo Pedo Yoga Chalida Manasaha Aprapya Yoga Samsiddhim Kam Gadim Krishna Gechadi Kachino Bhayavi Brashta Siddhnabhyuvanashyadi. So Apradishto Mahabhavo Vimudho Brahmanapati. The question is like this. Suppose we spend a lot of our time, resources, money, efforts, all these for spiritual practices, and then we know very well that we have not, suppose if somebody feels that he has not succeeded very much, or rather he had a deviation or did not achieve anything substantial in spiritual life, does it mean that all the time I spent was wasted? All the efforts, prayer, meditation, reading of scriptures, the Bible, Gita, all gone waste? Does it mean so? If it were so, then it's very cruel. Because people can have a distraction from the spiritual life. After having spent several years, there can be a distraction. People like St. Paul or St. Augustine, they had a later transformation. There are others who had an early good beginning, but then later distraction. Both ways it could happen. But suppose a person had a distraction or a deviation towards the end of one's life, or to his last few years of life, does it mean that all the early years were wasted, all the time, energy spent for prayer, meditation, wasted? So Lord Krishna says no. So he says, Gita says, that those who have done a lot of spiritual practices, whatever they do will be stored up in their spiritual bank balance. When they are born again, they'll be born with these accumulated tendencies and impressions. Those who have done a lot of spiritual practices will have a huge wealth of spiritual tendencies. And when they are born with this inheritance. Those who have not practiced so much, they still have both good and bad, but they'll be born in families where they will be able to fulfill their unfulfilled worldly desires and still later continue their spiritual evolution. So, Athava Yogina Meva Kule Bhavati Dhimadam Apadishto Mahabaho Vimudho Brahman. So, Athava Yogina Meva Kule Bhavati Dhimadam Edadhi Durlabhadaram Logi Jarmayadi. There are different versions. Now, those who have done a lot of spiritual practices, but then did not fully succeed and died, or some deviation, they'd be born in families where the family surroundings, the parents' training, which parents give to them, and the surroundings, the whole setting will be conducive to the continuation of their spiritual practices. And those who have had a distraction due to some worldly desire, there are people who frequently have this deviation, distraction. They will be born in certain families where they will be able to fulfill the desires, their unfulfilled desires, and then continue the spiritual journey. When such people are born, they are born with a mental system. Their chittam, the repository of the mind, where all the tendencies lay accumulated in many layers, that will invariably take them to higher spiritual life. Purvabhyasena tenaiva hridayi avashopisaha. Means because an individual has done a lot of spiritual practices in his or her previous life and have accumulated a lot of wonderful spiritual tendencies, by the pull, by the influence of these tendencies, they'll be forced to continue their spiritual practices. There are certain people born in family, parents may not encourage them to do any sacred reading. You should not waste time reading these religious, spiritual things. You should focus on studies only. There are families. But children take a lot of interest. Both ways you find. So parents sometimes force children to go to a place of spiritual practice, but when the children may not be enthusiastic, they may be reluctant. Both ways, both kinds of examples you find in this world. So what Vedanta tells you is, you'll be compelled, you'll be forced, but your own inherent accumulated tendencies stored up in your own mind to connect with the spiritual ideas that you already accumulated in your previous life. So the word avasha is you are helpless. See, we are in many ways we are helpless. We are helpless toys in the hands of our own samskara. Samskara means tendencies, attitudes, views, aptitudes. We are in many ways prisoners in the hands of our own habits and tendencies and impressions. There is not much freedom unless people deliberately start practicing, doing spiritual practices. So there are those who are born with the huge resource or reservoir of accumulated positive spiritual tendencies, which will compel them to continue the spiritual journey in spite of disagreeable circumstances, in spite of obstacles all around. Still they continue. If the tendencies are strong enough, powerful enough, they can withstand any difficulties. If their tendencies are not strong enough, then even the minor promptings or temptation can distract you away from your spiritual path, and then again eventually later you may come back to it. So that way Sri Ramakrishna says, a tiny plant should be protected with a fence around. Otherwise, goats or cattle come and eat it. But a big tree doesn't require any such protection. Even an elephant cannot bring it down. So, if our tendencies from previous life circles are strong enough, then they can pierce through any obstacle, any kind of negative circumstances or obstacles or problems. You feel, that's why, see, hridihi avashopisaha. You are helpless. Avasha means you are helpless in the hands of your own tendencies. If those tendencies are strong, then you are blessed and good. If good tendencies are strong and powerful, then you are blessed. Because it's a great help. You are already in a big boat which is taking you across the river. That's the idea behind it. Yeah.
Swami, can you help me understand Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Is it something that only sannyasis can attain?
Yeah, sannyasa as such should be interpreted as a state of spiritual experience, a spiritual evolution. So we have many such great men and women in our mythological literature who have reached the highest level of spiritual experience. So sannyasa should be taken as a stage of spiritual evolution. According to yoga, Patanjali yoga system, Nirvikalpa Samadhi doesn't require formal monastic vows, because Patanjali yoga system doesn't insist on that. But in Shankaracharya's tradition, sarva karma sannyasa is necessary. Sarva karma sannyasa purvagat jnanapat. So sarva karma sannyasa is necessary. So karma here means, as I mentioned, rituals. I already explained this yesterday. Shankara studies. Karma means ritual. So those who give up rituals, they should naturally give up those rituals which are associated with householder life. Actually, householders have certain rituals to perform. Those who have transcended the stage of those rituals, they have reached sannyasa stage. So, sannyasa should be taken as something related to our own spiritual evolution, really speaking. So, Yajnavalkya story in Brihadaranyaka, after long dialogue, Maitreyi left his home because he took Vidya sannyasa because he already reached that sarva karma sannyasa stage, even when he was living in the household. Then he took sannyasa, Vidya sannyasa. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi requires that level of total renunciation. That is a must. Otherwise, some vikalpa will be always there. Samadhi, the Samadhi word has two different meanings in yoga and also in Vedanta. So, in yoga and Vedanta, two different things. Yuj yogi, that is yoga, and yuj samadho, that is in Vedanta state. I will describe later. The same root is explained and described in two different ways.
Swamiji, I'll ask one more question. When you were discussing upasanas yesterday, you briefly touched on visualization. My question has to do with that you can say that seeing is more powerful than hearing, but there is also an aspect of hearing the mantra versus visualization. How would you ascribe relative importance to both types when you are doing upasana? The sense of hearing versus the sense of seeing.
Upasana, the Vaidika upasana mentioned here, like Samhita upasanam, Onkara upasanam, Pranava upasana, Vyakruti upasana, Dakharakasha upasana, all these are mentioned here. So, upasana generally means continuous, when our mind continuously, like a tailadhara, like a oil is poured into another vessel from one vessel. This is an unbroken succession of stream. If you pour water, there will be a slight break, but oil is so continuous, unbroken flow. Like that, when our mind flows towards the spiritual goal, it's called upasana. Okay, now Yesterday I was mentioning that these upasanas mentioned in the Shikshavalli, the Samhita Upasana, all those upasanas are called Vaidika upasanas. Those upasanas are mostly our attempt to connect with the transcendental or all-pervading spiritual reality and attaining the Sarvatma Bhava. So the normal upasanas that we talk about in the context of temple worship, it's called Laukika Upasana. So where you do upasana, you meditate, you do puja, you contemplate on a particular deity, expecting some result. There is nothing wrong in it. Vedanta philosophy doesn't find fault with people who go to temples and pray for some needs. Nothing wrong in it, because that itself is a beginning of a higher spiritual journey. That's a common misunderstanding. I will not pray, I will not go to temple, because people go and pray for long life, passing examination. I won't believe in that. If that person who talks like that is a Paramahamsa, then his words are relevant. Otherwise, absolute trash. It's just like a small child tells you, oh, I don't want to go to kindergarten, I want to go to Harvard, or I want to go to Stanford. I don't believe in going to primary school or kindergarten. It's totally useless. He will remain an illiterate person. That's all. So the point is this: these Laukika upasanas are mostly done with some mantras. Those mantras relate to one particular deity. So as we repeat the mantras, there are 4 stages in the evolution of mantra japa. It's called para, pashyanti, madhyama, vaikhari. The highest reach of mantra upasana, the spiritual practice uttering a sacred mantra, is para, where you feel your identity. You are completely immersed in the thought of your Ishta Devata. That is the highest state. The lowest state is Vaikhari, where you utter the mantra loudly, without much introspection. It's not bad or it's not useless. It is certainly fruitful and useful, but it's only the beginning of the spiritual practice. So, para, pasyanti, madhyama, vaikhari. So, after vaikhari there is madhyama. When your japa becomes more subtle, it's not very loud, but then your lips may move, called vachika, but it is still not the highest. So the pashyanti stage, where you will be uttering your mantra internally, but there is no external show, nothing visible outside. Para stage, you become one with the mantrartha, the essence of the mantra, the deity, highest realization, mantra japa. So there is a gradual evolution from gross to subtle in spiritual life. So in the Samhita, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, we are not talking about that kind of upasana. Here, the devotee or the spiritual seeker is trying to realize that what is within him is also everywhere. So, what is the all-pervading, the omnipresent reality is the same as the indweller, the subtle spiritual truth in him. So that universality, universal experience is the goal in these upasanas. For that, different symbols are used. Dekarakasha, where the infinitude of sky is used. There are different. This particular upasana is called, it's called Varuni upasana. Like that, different various upasanas are mentioned. Upasanas are meditative practices. We must follow that discipline, and also we must do karma yoga. But in the highest Advaitic experience, you don't deliberately give up work. Work leaves you. We don't give up work when we transcend work, work leaves you. We are not deliberately giving up. That's why the highest spiritual teachers, they never stop working. But for them it was not work. It was just their natural way of life. So, if we have any question, in general about the Upanishads, we are big listening. Otherwise,
Swami, for a man of a Sthita Prajna or that kind of a person, Jivan Mukta, whatever words we use, for them, do they have a desire of, I shall do this, I must do this? Not for their own ego, of course, but as a service to God or to
yeah.
the higher ideal. Do they take up works by their own volition, or do they only accept work that comes to them of its own accord?
Yeah. So there are two types of the most highly exalted souls in the world. Those who come as epoch makers. They come as if for a specific spiritual mission. When you analyze their life and their contribution, you suddenly are struck by the fact that if they had not worked and if they had not come, humanity would have lost something very precious in his spiritual heritage. Examples are Buddha, Shankaracharya, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, etc. Examples. They come for a specific purpose. When you analyze the times in which they came and what they left behind when they left the world, you'll realize that if they had not come, there would have been a wide gap. To give an example, we won't be discussing Vedanta, Upanishads or Gita if Shankaracharya had not come and worked. If Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had not come and worked, also we won't be discussing Vedanta. Vedantic heritage would have remained within India's cultural and geographical boundaries. So you can see the impact. And you can see in the broader sense, you can say, think of Christ or Buddha. So you can't think of them without their mission, their contribution to the world. Because the impact and influence still continues with the Christ or Buddha or Shankara, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, like that. But there are individual great saints whom we read about today, who lived during the last several centuries. You don't associate that kind of impact with their advent. They were great and they enriched our tradition and culture. Because they revived and they also had many adherents. But you can't say that if they had not come to the world, spirituality would have disappeared. We can't say that. So there are two types of spiritual teachers who have reached this Sthita Prajna state. So the ordinary spiritual seekers may or may not continue teaching. They are not under any vidhi or nishedha. There is no rule that tells that they should all work, and there is no rule that tells that they should not do anything. It is difficult to say. In fact, they transcend. They go beyond the realm of do's and don'ts. That is a very important point to remember. Even somebody like Ramana Maharshi, for example, who did not start a mission or his paradigm change structure, he did not create. But so long as he was living in Tiruvannamalai, whenever somebody went to him, he taught them, he instructed them, he discussed spiritual subjects. He never said, no, from now onwards I won't say that. He didn't do that. So normally, the majority of the great spiritual teachers who may not be ranked like Shankara or Buddha or Ramakrishna, still they always did, they continued doing their work for the good of others. It's their natural habit. There's an idea behind. So they transcend the equation of do's and don'ts. That's it.
Swamiji, I had a question on the samskaras. You said you come with past samskaras. Is it possible to identify for oneself what those samskaras are, so that you can, move
Really.
in the right direction?
Yeah, when we do certain things and we feel a kind of inner spiritual enrichment, in our mind itself tells, this is what I should do. You may not be able to do that all the time. Your mind may not cooperate. But when you do that, you feel you're feeling at home. An inner harmony you feel. And you also realize that it takes you to a higher life. It gives you kind of inner, kridarthada and kridakrityada. Kridakritya, that word is used in Gita also. So you find that you find certain words, deeds, thoughts, ideas will give you a feeling at home, an inherent inner intimacy, or proximity, or understanding, harmony. You feel that. But all the time your mind may not be willing to do that. Because negative samskaras are not always permitting us to do that. So you can dictate your own samskaras. What is very strong in you, it gives you a feeling of intimacy, inherent feeling at home. That is your samskara. These samskaras may not be identical in 5 members of the same family who are being brought up under the same by the same parents, having same education. Still, samskaras can vary. That itself shows there is something more than what meets the eye. Yeah.
Swamiji, modern science and medicine is very interested in increasing our longevity, how long we are in this incarnation. And they're also very interested in meditating on transcendental truths, would that alleviate such problems as Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah.
Which is very common with older people. Does Vedanta have anything to say about it?
Can you repeat the first part of your question?
Yes. That
Modern medicine.
modern medicine is very interested in increasing our lifespan.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, clear. No, it's clear. Okay. Now, nothing wrong in it. If we could increase our lifespan by several years more, that's wonderful. There is nothing wrong in it. And meditation and self-relaxation practices can at least temporarily give us a feeling of relaxation because we are disconnecting with our present mind and its burdens. That's why we feel an inner relief, really. This we call emptying the mind of all its stressful thought currents and emotions, give us a feeling of relief. And that relief can perhaps help us to retain mental health, restfulness. That is true. And certain diseases associated with the inner mental stress can be reduced by these methods.
Can this reduction in stress, can this increase our longevity?
Certainly, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Nervous fatigue, the metabolism, all can be reduced, remedied to some extent by relaxation. If we can take our mind away from itself if we can take our mind away from its own emotions, its own conflicting thought currents, its own frictions, then mind naturally feels relieved. A huge burden is taken off itself. And that feeling comes in mindfulness. That's why Buddha gave a long discourse on this subject. That's a original text of mindfulness. That is called Satipatthana Sutta. Khuddaka Nikaya it is called. Buddha's long discourse on mindfulness. How to keep our mind in a state of awareness and a state of being a witness. If we can witness our own emotions, if we can be witness of our own mind, then actually you can increase mental restfulness. So suppose a person gets angry. If he is not practicing any kind of spiritual discipline, his whole mind takes the form of anger. His whole mental system gets identified with anger. But if he is a spiritual practitioner, his mind develops a faculty of awareness. Mind becomes aware of itself becoming angry. And when you are aware of the fact that your mind is getting angry, your anger is reduced. This happens to all human emotions. If you can dissociate your mind with its own emotions, then mind can act as a witness of what is going on within itself. And then, when you're observing, that anxiety, those problems are reduced. Because mind is not fully identifying with anger. When he is aware of is becoming angry, it is not fully identifying itself with anger. When it identifies itself with anger, it cannot be aware of it. See, when you are playing in a drama on the stage, you cannot be sitting in the gallery. You are sitting in the gallery, you cannot be playing on the stage. Both cannot function simultaneously. So being a witness and being an actor, both cannot go together. So if we can actually train our mind to be an observer and a witness and a subject observing its own functions, then some of the problems can be reduced.
Does that translate into increasing our
Lifespan. Mental health always increases. Many problems like hypertension, BP, even diabetes, many of these problems are aggravated by too much of anxiety, fatigue and anguish, and feeling of insecurity. All these increase many of these problems directly and indirectly. Mental problems, mental anguish can reduce, can influence human physical activity. You may give up your doing exercise. You may give up disciplining your own diet when your mind is disturbed. At a very physical level, it affects. And of course, this blood pressure, stress level, tension, and even diabetes, all this can be affected directly. Yeah. But the point is, if you use spiritual disciplines as a tool to increase physical health, its effect will be less. If you do spiritual practice for spiritual goal, for attaining spiritual goal, its effect will be more. If you reduce spiritual practice just as a tool for increasing physical health, its effect will be much less. Okay?
I don't want practice.
Yeah.
Intention is not to identify with my body as my true self. At the same time, maybe in conjunction with that question, I do want to preserve my physical health, this vessel that I have with which to practice. And knowing too, I think that to the extent that I have physical health, then that's not unrelated to mental health as well.
Yeah,
That they're
both are related, as
So
we mentioned.
So it occurs to me to wonder with Swami Vivekananda. I mean, I think he was aware of his health. He was
Yeah.
aware of the
Yeah,
of the character of his physical health.
yeah.
Did he? I would imagine at different points in his life, he consciously may have made decisions that were contrary to his physical health in terms of what his mission was. And at the same time, as I just said, if he did that, would that not have also had negative consequences on his mental health and his awareness and clarity?
You find if you read Vivekananda's life after the Parliament of Religion and also after 2-3 years spending in this country, it seems that he was in a hurry. You can get the feeling he was consciously in a hurry to finish off some important work he felt he had in front of him. And he frequently mentioned that he won't live long, he won't reach the 40th year. He passed away when he was 39 years. He himself almost predicted. So, and not only that, you see, he was fully aware of it. Even the day on which he passed away, he was teaching Sanskrit grammar, as I mentioned. For 3 hours, he continuously discussed that subject. It's not a very pleasant or easy subject. And then, so he thought that also was part of his mission, because he had insisted that the monks of the Ramakrishna order that he founded should study Sanskrit, should become familiar with the important concepts of philosophical works in Sanskrit. He has given clear guidelines and instructions how the monastery should be run, what training monastic should be given. The whole picture of that part of Vivekananda's work is not very well understood even in this country, because here we become too obsessed with Chicago addresses. But that was only very small part of his work. That's an important point. Vivekananda, according to his own account, came as a as a link of an ancient line of teachers. And one very important part of his mission was to start this monastic order, which he wanted to use its resources, which monks of the order should spend their time in promoting this message of Vedanta all over the world. That was the purpose. For that, he knew he will have to establish a solid foundation for a monastic tradition, which he did. So all that he did as if he was doing a work which was with so much of a feeling of awareness and detachment, without any obsessive concern for his own physical health. If he did not have that level of total detachment to his physical health or physical well-being, he would not have spent 3 hours teaching a very complicated subject, a Sanskrit grammar. He would have perhaps taken rest, he knew. So you find it's almost like a drama coming to end slowly, gradually. And then he went to the shrine and asked the disciples to stand outside. He meditated for a long time, came out and went to his room and flat and died. So, in his case, I believe, he knew that he was not destined to live very long, more than 39 years. And he knew he was affected by diabetes. But you don't find him expressing very much concern, a lot of concern about those conditions. You find if you see Vivekananda's picture, just a few months or maybe 1 year before he passed away, and a few years earlier, there is a great difference you find. Suddenly he feels aged. I mean, he was totally detached to the very idea of preserving his physical health or the problem of diabetes. That's because he was so much linked to the spiritual dimension of his personality. For him, this body was just an instrument. And it was not going to last more than 39 years, so it should be used properly. So he preached Vedanta in the West, in Europe, in India. He traveled all over the country. He established monastic order, and he made many predictions and prophecies which are still surprisingly coming true. He looked at the landscape and predicted there will be a university here, there will be a Vedic Pathashala, which he actually founded. There was no Vedic tradition as such in Bengal. So he wanted to bring Vedic tradition to Bengal, so he prophesied and wanted a Vedic institution to be founded there, and it has become a reality. It has become a reality. So you find it's almost a drama slowly coming to an end. That's how we feel when we observe Vivekananda's life. More or less you find the same with regard to all the great spiritual teachers, epoch makers of the world.
He certainly was aware of his mortality. He seemed disinterested in it.
Yeah.
It is said he had diabetes. Was there any proof that he had diabetes?
Yeah, he was supposed to have diabetes. Yeah.
I just was wondering if anybody...
No, there was no treatment, perhaps the kind of treatment we have today.
I realized there was no treatment, but
Yeah,
I just wondered how he established that he had diabetes.
That was, I can't say, I can't give a clear-cut answer, but it is said that he had diabetes. There are different ways. You can ask our doctor, he will tell you how in those days they could have established this. Later we can ask. Yeah, they had their own ways, maybe not so sophisticated methods as we have today, but they had their own methods in those days to establish this. But maybe not very effective treatment to counter. Yeah. So thank you. So our retreat is coming to an end. Every great and glorious thing has one problem, that it should come to an end one day. Thank you. So I will do Shanti Mantra, then we will complete. Om Shanno Mitrasyam Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaramavatu Avatu Mam Avatu Bhaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhidamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishnarpanamastu.